Hi there, we are Node Labs, and our project is Copyright Compliance and Licensing Patterns in African NLP Datasets, a data-driven governance analysis.
Most African NLP datasets lack clear copyright and licensing information, which creates governance risks that could undermine responsible AI development. This is because governance quality of datasets used to train AI systems is often overlooked, especially in African NLP projects and research. And unclear licensing practices often create risks which include misuse of publicly accessible datasets, legally uncertain commercial applications, weak institutional governance practices. And as a result, a data-driven analysis was needed to identify governance gaps and structural patterns within NLP projects. This brought us to the two goals of this project. Goal 1 being diagnosing and quantifying copyright and licensing risks across African NLP datasets using structured indicators, and Goal 2, which identified patterns and correlations between licensing practices and variables such as funding source, authorship geography, and commercial intent. Our dataset comprised of 249 African NLP projects which were manually coded across 38 variables, which captured governance structures, copyright and licensing statuses, as well as funding sources, and etc. Our EDA revealed to us that our dataset was full of inconsistencies, spelling variations, and high sparsity. As a result, we had to build a Python pipeline that automatically cleaned the inputs and fixed the variations and flagged gaps. This included us removing administrative metadata, standardizing categories, and ensuring that all the columns were in consistent formats. The 9 variables shown below were chosen as risk indicators to assess legal compliance and governance risk. These variables were chosen because they represent legal, procedural, and transparency-related indicators of copyright compliance. To initialize our copyright compliance analysis across the 249 projects, we first built a composite risk score matrix using the 9 licensing indicators. This gave each project a score from low to high risk. Next, we applied Kramer V to measure associations between indicators and visualize this in a heat map. We then used K-means clustering to group projects into 3 clusters based on similar risk patterns, and this was our form of unsupervised machine learning. Finally, we ran a principal component analysis to reduce the 9 indicators into 2 dimensions, allowing us to visualize hidden structures and variations across the projects. Scoring matrix, and we can see that 141 projects classified as medium risk, while 92 classified as high risk and 16 classified as low risk. And this chart here just shows the different proportions of the risk classifications. While this table here, we can actually go and identify each NLP project's risk score as well as the risk level, and also see what cluster it was classified when we did unsupervised learning, as well as the PCA readings. Here we see the different NLP project in a scatter plot, and we can actually be able to identify each NLP project. So for example, here, this is NLP project 27. So we'll just use the table here to go and find which one it was and be able to identify which projects fell into which category. And then here, this is just at the indicator level, whereby we can be able to look at each indicator and see how did the different variables in each indicator contribute to the risk scoring classifications. For example, here, if copyright status was unclear, there were more counts for high-risk projects, while when we had copyright protected projects, we had more counts for medium risk projects. And then here we just have the PCA in K-means in PCA space. So we just wanted to see the different clusterings of the unsupervised learning which we did. and then we just saw that there were three major clusters which formed. And these were just the loadings that helped us to determine which access is for which. So here we saw that copyright status and legal basis would be PCA loadings 1, while PCA loadings 2 was more contributed by data source type, so on this side of the axis.
Two aim to determine whether licensing practices are randomly distributed across African NLP projects or whether they systematically vary according to institutional factors. Thus, three explanatory variables were selected: funding source, authorship geography, and commercialization orientation. We then analyzed their relationship with three governance outcomes: licensing clarity, permission status, and output rights reservation. We used a five-stage modeling pipeline. We began with descriptive cross-tabulations, then tested statistical association using chi-square and Cramer's V. We explored latent patterns using MCA also, identified governance profiles using K-mode clustering, and finally quantified predictor effects using multinomial logistic regression. When we look at our Goal 2 dashboard overview, we can immediately see a governance transparency problem across African NLP projects. Almost half of the projects have ambiguous licensing, while most projects do not explicitly state whether permission was obtained for copyright content. This suggests that licensing uncertainty is widespread across the ecosystem. Users can dynamically filter their projects by funding source, authorship geography, and commercialization intent to explore governance patterns in specific contexts. Cross-tabulation analysis revealed clear differences across institutional categories such as funding source, authorship geography, and commercialization orientation. Projects with no stated funding exhibited the weakest licensing transparency, while corporate and global north-funded projects demonstrated stronger governance practices. Multiple correspondence analysis also reveals hidden structures in the data, separating strong governance profiles from weak governance profiles. On one side, explicit licensing, open permission, and permissive reuse cluster together, forming a coherent good governance profile. On the other side, categories such as not stated and unclear appear together, representing high-risk governance profile. MLR was used to quantify predictor influence. The coefficient heat maps and dot plots show that commercialization orientation has the largest impact on licensing clarity outcomes, while funding source plays a meaningful role, in particular in predicting permission status.
Overall, Go1's analysis showed that most of the projects fell into the medium risk category, which reflected partial compliance and mixed governance practices, while about 37% were high risk, which were typically marked by unclear copyright status, missing permissions, and absent legal basis for use. In contrast, low-risk projects demonstrated that explicit licensing, permissions, and IP analysis can substantially reduce exposure to copyright compliance risks, while Kramer V's revealed that weak governance association indicators tend to cluster together. Projects with unclear permissions also showed ambiguous licensing and weak rights of reservation. K-means classifying or clustering identified three risk profiles: a low-risk project with open licensing and clear governance, a medium-risk group with medium-risk documentation, and high-risk group with persistent uncertainty. Overall, the projects with transparent licensing, explicit permissions, and stronger documentation consistently aligned with low risk.
Major insights emerged. First, governance opacity is widespread across the ecosystem, with licensing ambiguity and unstated permissions appearing across most project categories. Second, commercialization appears to conclusion, the study found that licensing opacity remains widespread across African NLP projects. Through different complementary modeling approaches, we showed that licensing practices are not random. Commercial